In today's video, we're breaking down how to get a 7 in your English paper 1. If you're aiming to ace this paper, you're in the right place. I went from a 5 in my mocks to a 7 in my finals, and here's exactly what I did step by step. The first step is to understand the paper 1 format. Paper 1 is all about unseen commentary. You'll be asked to analyze 1 or 2 texts based on whether you're SL or HL. I was HL, so I really didn't have an option between the two. If you're an SL student, make sure you read both the texts and see which points at the tip of your tongue without having to analyze it that much you know you're going to be able to write more about, or which format you're more familiar with. The formats can be non-fiction, poetry, prose, magazines, infographics, and your job is to analyze this on the spot. You'll analyze the language, the structure, the tone, the mood, the literary devices. And for this, you need to make sure to be well versed with uncommon literary devices. Now, this is important, but make sure you're not just throwing in names for the sake of it, because when you use your literary devices wrong, just because it sounds good, like, oh, I'll put in like glittering generalities. If you're throwing in like random terms like that and you have no idea what the meaning is and you're just doing it for the sake of it, don't do that, because your marks will actually get cut for that, or they'll not appreciate it and they'll think that you just don't know what you're talking about and you're just analyzing for the sake of analyzing. So to avoid this, you need to make sure to know your types of formats that could come, and you need to know exactly which literary devices are seen common in practice papers. The second technique I'm sure you've heard of, but it's called PEEL. Point, evidence, explain, and link. You'll make your point, you'll give the evidence, which is the actual phrase or word, you'll explain the effect of it, and then you link it back to your main thesis. Linking it back to your main thesis is so important because it's just keeping you organized and making sure that you're not going off topic. In my planning stage, I really like to note down PEEL after every single point, so that I'm actually going to make sure that I'm consciously trying to link it back to the main thesis, which is the one thing that I think I keep missing out on. This is one thing that I really changed from my mocks to my finals, and I'm so glad that I did. There's one major change that I made, which I'll talk about in the next step. Oh, and as a bonus, avoid repeating your points when it has the same analysis but it's just different evidences. You'll either A, make sure that the evidences are clubbed together and you're explaining the same point, but it can sometimes get a little messy, so I would suggest B, just cutting off one of the points which has less analysis to talk about. And also, if you want, you can go in a chronological order when you're explaining whatever you're explaining, but if your thesis is completely different, then like obviously do it based on your thesis. And obviously this brings us to our third point. Did you see how I linked that? Yeah, you need to also make sure that you have like a flowing connection between your paragraphs, which is a bonus step, I guess, because that's not my third point. My third point is to create a very strong thesis. Your thesis is the backbone of your essay, and you need to make sure that it's both strong and specific. You won't say something vague, such as, the author uses stylistic devices to convey a negative tone about social media. The author critiques the pervasive influence of social media, arguing that it erodes authentic human connections. A strong thesis like this will get you going in your entire essay and will give a very good first impression to your examiner. You need to avoid broad generalizations and statements such as, oh yeah, they use the literary devices to convey the theme of something, or blah 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 blah. You need to have a very specific approach. I need to make sure that you don't have to use every single thing that's given to you. Like the entire resource, you can't analyze the entire thing, and you need to make sure that you're very good at picking out the strongest points which you can analyze and making sure your thesis is catered towards that. Which comes to our fourth point, which is choosing and analyzing evidence. When you're selecting your quotations, you make sure that they're directly answering your point or giving evidence to support it. First of all, avoid very long quotations because it just gives an impression to the examiner that you don't know how to really like select your quotes. I suggest using certain words, phrases, and just analyzing the effect of that. Analyze each piece of evidence very thoroughly, and you'll explain the significance and how it helps your argument. You need to make sure that all of your analysis is related to your thesis in some way or the other. Don't go too off topic, even if you have two interpretations, and even though your analysis might be right, it's just showing the examiner that you don't know how to stick to your thesis. And also a bonus tip, which is what I've been doing since IGCSE, and I scored a 96 in my literature. Because of this, I use my own unique interpretations of whatever text that I got. You need to have that creative mindset to think about why the author is using the stylistic device, but not only the general or cliche kind of explanation, that you can for sure add. But after that, I made sure to add my own interpretation, my own analysis, which is completely different from everyone who's analyzing the same text as me. Now, this is something which is not in the mark scheme, but it just gives that examiner that extra flair from my side, which I can show them that I actually understand the text to like beyond the level that is expected in a way. I know I'm talking about myself like this, but like my analysis usually is like completely not what anybody thinks. And number 5, planning and structuring your essay. Now, we did discuss the peel technique, which is very important, but you need to make sure that you plan your essay really well. Planning is the most important stage, and you can spend a good like 10-15 minutes planning your essays depending on how much time you take to write. And also quality over quantity. This is one mistake that I made in my mocks which got me a 5, and it's that I wrote so much and I thought that because I wrote so much that my quality would be so good. But after proofreading, because I never proofread any of my work, I realized that there were similar points, there was unnecessary points, and sometimes I just went off topic completely and I was nowhere near my thesis. Where somebody who was writing like 3-4 pages where I was writing 8, they were still getting way higher marks and almost perfect scores. Also, you'll decide on planning your main points and also how they link together, which will just make the flow of your essay better. So if you want to put some points above others, or if you want to do it in chronological order, this is the time when you decide that in the planning stage. This avoids any vague points or too weird interpretations that go away from the thesis. This will show to the examiner that you know how to pick your points extremely well. When you're planning, just in your head, see how each paragraph will flow from one to the other and how it's actually answering or arguing towards your thesis. And if it's not mid writing it, but like mid planning, you can just scrap an entire point if it's really not providing enough value towards your thesis. And make sure you have your strongest points at the top. That's going to really give them a good first impression. And the last point is to practice and practice. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become, and you can find a lot of English past papers online. And by practicing, don't practice and focus on text types that you're already familiar with. I really recommend going through all the papers and seeing which text types are appearing and making a list based on whatever is hardest to you and whatever is easiest, and starting with the hardest, because when you practice harder things and you familiarize yourself with that from like an earlier stage, it's just way better in my opinion. After writing, you basically compare your commentary to a mark scheme where you'll have like certain points, but like I said, there are some unique interpretations which like you've put and you don't know how to grade yourself on that, and it's basically not really personalized, which comes to my bonus tip, which is to get an IB trained teacher at Sparkl to help give you feedback on your essay. They'll basically just identify where you're going wrong in your analysis, and if your interpretations, if they're unique or if they're not in the mark scheme, will they actually get you more marks, like award you more marks, or will it prove to the examiner that you're just not picking your points right and it's very unorganized and shabby? English is a subject which is extremely subjective, probably one of the most subjective subjects in the IB, and a mark scheme is not really going to give you as much insight that you wish that it could, and like in comparison to like a real life person or like an examiner or like a teacher. So I think that at Sparkl, they know their criteria and they understand the subject well, which is why I recommend it. And that is my time, everyone. But wait, before you go, if you want more IB advice, studying guides and college applications, or any academic topic advice in general, make sure to subscribe to Fits by Arjun as well as Sparkl. Both the links will be down in the description below. Also hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications from us, and let's crush that English paper 1 together. Fits by Arjun out.